Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and I'd like to welcome you to the Practical Stoic Podcast, where I give you practical Stoic advice for modern times. If you'd like to learn more about Stoicism, or if you want some added inspiration in your day, just go to my website. It's risetothegoodlife.com. If you're interested in transforming your life with Stoic principles, then I also offer one-on-one coaching. To book your first free session, just head to risetothegoodlife.com/coaching and follow the links. But for now, enjoy this episode. Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to the Practical Stoic Podcast. Since I interviewed Kai Whiting last week, I've been thinking about how Stoicism can inform the way that we make decisions in our everyday life, whether those are small decisions or big decisions. And so in this Wednesday podcast, I really wanted to hear from you guys. How have you used Stoicism to improve the way that you make decisions in your life? And as I expected, we had some really amazing answers from all of you. So I'm so excited to get into them. So I'll go straight into an answer from a regular, Leo, who said, I've tried to incorporate the 4 Stoic virtues, wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage, in my decision making. For example, at the moment, we are in the process of purchasing a home. When it comes to courage, as Stoics, we forge ahead and provide for our family. Stoicism is a philosophy of action. With temperance, we can only purchase within our means. When it comes to wisdom, we attended an auction on the weekend and narrowly missed out. We could control our actions, but ultimately we had no control over who else was bidding. And justice? I reflected on how lucky we are in Australia to be able to participate in purchasing a house in a just and fair way. It was a disappointing weekend, but ultimately we are better for this experience, and fate permitting, the cards will fall our way. So Leo, thank you so much for that answer, and good luck with the rest of your home searching. And next we had an answer from Lewis, who said, I try to consider decisions based on what matters in the long term, but at the same time I try to detach myself from the outcome of that decision when it has been made. I find that regretting the decision does nothing to change the ultimate outcome. That does not mean there is not a need to review my performance in the process of my decision making, but once I have made the decision, I have no interest in thinking further about it. My goal is to make the best of the decisions I make, learn from them to better myself, and not to ruminate on the decision itself. Once I make the decision, it is no longer in my control. So thank you, Lewis, for that answer. I absolutely agree. It's a good point that you bring up there that, once you've made that decision, you really can't control how that decision impacts your life. But you can control the decision at the start, and you can control how you react to the events that happen after you making that decision. So that's a really great point. Thank you so much for sharing that. And moving on, we had an answer from Josh, who said, For me, Stoicism reminds me to ask myself 3 simple questions before speaking or acting on something. First, is this situation or decision worth concerning myself with? Second, if so, what benefit will each choice have for myself and for the whole? And third, am I acting true to my nature, or is this decision being influenced by others? So Josh, thank you so much for that answer. I really love that process that you have there. And this is what I love about a lot of these answers that I'm reading today, is that you guys have really thought about the system that you want to have in place when you're faced with a difficult decision. I think that's a really great place to start, creating a kind of system in your life that you go to every time you need to make a decision. So thanks again for that answer, Josh. I appreciate it. And next we had an answer from Scott, who said, I've only recently adopted Stoicism, and I've had several positive changes in my life already. As far as making decisions, I've started using a few questions to help make sure that I'm making informed and virtuous decisions. First, is it the right and virtuous thing to do? Second, are my expectations of the outcome under my control? If not, I need to reevaluate the expectation or decision. Third, am I acting out of emotion or according to my values? This comes into play a lot for me because I'm a stress eater and I'm working on making better choices every day when it comes to food. I've also found that this makes all of my decisions easier to make, having a compass to help you move in the right direction. Scott, thank you so much for that answer, and I appreciate the analogy of the compass. It goes back to what Massimo Pigliucci said in his interview, that for him, Stoicism is kind of like a compass to guide his life. I really believe that philosophy, and Stoicism in particular, can be the perfect compass for a person's life. So thank you for that answer. And moving on, we had a response from Andrew, who said, Stoicism reminds me to first, rationally and logically play through a decision. I consider all outcomes, both preferred and not preferred, and weigh all options. I see what is under my control and what is not. For instance, I had a work situation in the past week where a multitude of outcomes were possible, and I rationalized that while I could not control what happened, I could control my response to whatever outcome manifested. Secondly, like others have said, I begin to think through those actions and words from a frame of virtue. I ask if what I'm going to do or say has virtue, or does it just feel vice? So Andrew, thank you so much for that answer. It is true that, every decision that we make should be based on if it's a virtuous thing to do or not, and for that specific situation. The Stoics really do teach that the ultimate goal of life is virtue and wisdom, and so we really should have that at the back of our minds constantly. And moving on, we had an answer from Catalin, who said, I've listened to the podcast episode on having a personal philosophy, and based on the questions, I wrote my own personal philosophy. Reading afterwards was a shock because I realized that most of my actions are not aligned with who I want to be. Since then, before every action I feel unsure on, I ask myself if it agrees with my philosophy. So Catalin, thank you so much for that answer. I really love that people are taking things away from this podcast and using them in a very practical way in their life. And that's what I wanted out of that particular episode. I really wanted to help people to get really, really clear on exactly who they wanted to be, because that really is the first step towards any sort of progress in life. It's knowing who you want to be and how you want to act. So thank you so much for putting that into practice. And next we had an answer from Gunnar, who said, when I need to make a decision, I try to ask myself if the choice I'm making is in accordance with nature and if it is in my control. I try to weigh out all of the possible outcomes, both positive and negative, and make the decision accordingly. If the situation is ultimately out of my control, I try to avoid taking unnecessary action. And we had a similar answer from Laura, who said, I have the same process. First, I recognize that there is a decision to be made. Second, I determine what is in my control and what is out of my control. Third, let rationality kick in, weighing the outcomes and the different paths that can be taken, and getting out of the emotional pull that some of the paths have. That cognitive dissonance combined with the time to evaluate the situation is critical to feeling you've made the best possible decision. And then, even if the outcome is not what you've hoped for, Stoicism helps you to deal with that as well. You can do your best to aim the arrow, but you cannot control where it lands. So thank you to Gunnar and Laura for those answers. I really do love that idea of looking at all these possible outcomes of the decisions that you'll make. And I know that that can be extremely helpful for anyone wanting to make the best possible decision. So thank you so much for your answers. And next we had an answer from Brennan, who said, I think of myself as navigating a landscape of potential actions. I am lost and need to get back home, that is, back to being in accord with nature. I take out my compass, which points towards wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. I take out my map, which is my attention and objective awareness of my surroundings and all things external. Knowing the terrain, I can figure out which direction I need to move, which virtue I need to use, to find my way home. I have been practicing from this perspective for about a week, and I've noticed some solid results. Brennan, thank you so much for that answer. I really love that whole analogy that you gave there of, really trying to get home. So I know that that'll be really helpful for everybody listening. So thank you so much for that answer. And so moving on, we had an answer from Dan, and he said, Stoicism guides my decision-making process in that when the world goes sideways and it counts most, Stoicism allows a decision-making process to take place at all. When a person is ruled by their passions, they are not making the decisions. The passions are in control and guiding their life. Inevitably, this can lead to some very poor outcomes. Applying Stoic principles, developing the 4 cardinal virtues, and mastering the passions allows us the freedom to make rational choices and to guide our actions and thoughts. So Dan, thank you so much for that response. And, I really love that point that you bring up there, which is that a lot of us are controlled by our passions and they are guiding our life. And so it's really important that we come back to our attention and focus on making decisions rationally, not based on our emotions, not based on passions, because that can really lead to some poor results. So thanks again for that response. And next we had an answer from Jeff, and he said, I'm very stoic in situations where I have fast, critical, or maybe even emergency decisions to make. In those situations, I normally have thought through contingencies and have some ideas of possible actions. I do this naturally because of sports and military training, but in situations that are chiefly emotional, I struggle to maintain a stoic mindset. This is where most of my stoic practice takes place. When I'm on my game, I'm guided mostly by the dichotomy of control. So Jeff, thanks for that response. And we've heard this a couple of times so far, this point that the dichotomy of control can be so powerful when making decisions. It's so helpful to look at your life and say, what can I control? What can I not control? Now let's move towards the direction of things that I can control, because that's where I have the most power. So I appreciate your response. And finally, our last answer comes from Eric. And he says, Stoicism helps me to consider all events of life with equanimity, including people and myself. Like a scientist who needs to be detached to understand life, Stoicism underlines that emotions might be more like filters that obscure the full observation of reality or truth. The painful part is to accept that reality and truth is not all about me, and I'm still struggling with that part. So Eric, thank you so much for that response. I love what you're saying about, trying to almost be like a scientist and detach yourself from the emotions of the situation so that you can see it clearly. This is so important for every decision that you make. And so thank you so much for bringing that up. And so this concludes all of the answers from today's episode. And I just want to thank all of you again. These answers were so beautiful and they were so practical and helpful. I really appreciate that. And so everybody who is listening to this, I know that you'll be able to take away at least one amazing strategy that you can use in your life today to make better decisions, whether they're big decisions or small decisions. So again, thank you so much to all of you who have answered this week's question. And I'll let you know that if you have been wanting to get involved in this weekly podcast and start giving some answers to my questions, there are two ways that you can do that. You can either join the Facebook group that we have going, which is called the Practical Stoic Mastermind. We'd love to have you there. Or you can go ahead and join my email list, which is on my website. So just go to risetothegoodlife.com and there should be a little ribbon that pops up at the bottom and you can enter your email and I'll send the question out every single week. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. I'll talk to you next time, but until then, I hope that this episode has helped you on your rise to the good life. Ciao. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. I hope that you've gotten a lot of value out of it, and I hope that it helps you to live a better life. If you have enjoyed the podcast, then don't forget to subscribe so that you'll be the first to know when there are new episodes. If you really love the podcast, then I would appreciate a positive review, whether that's on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever else you listen. Don't forget that if you're interested in one-on-one Stoic coaching, then you can head to risetothegoodlife.com/coaching to book your first free session today.